morning we have Rane Curley from Redmond, and her speech is titled Farmland, the Big Cut.
A happy little farm lay about 10 miles from town. Seated in a prime location on over 100 acres, the land annually supported a large herd of cattle, a flock of sheep, and a number of butcher hogs, as well as several orchards and fields of grain. Every day, the young couple who owned the farm would go out and care for their livestock and tend their crops, pouring everything they had into the soil at their feet. But finances were tight, and each year, they made just enough to cover their costs and invest in the next year's season. Then they had a bad winter. The stock suffered and the crops went in late. Their meager fall harvest couldn't pay the bills, and the couple was at their wits' end when the offer came in from the developer. It was a number they couldn't turn down. They sold the farm and the herds and moved to town. Shortly after, the luscious grasses and trees were transformed into row upon row of suburban homes. It's not a source story, but it could be. From the tree groves of the West Coast, across the wide open plains of the Midwest, to the wet conditions of the East Coast, agricultural land is not so slowly turning into a carpet of urban development and industrial factories. Less than 6% of the Earth's surface is suitable for agriculture and growing food. When climate, soils, and topography are factored into the equation, just over half of this land can be farmed without any physical constraints. And of that, over 10% of the world's arable acres are in the United States. A comprehensive study released by the American Farmland Trust shows us that between 1992 and 2012, nearly 31 million acres of farmland were lost to development. 11 million of which were America's best agricultural land with superior soil conditions and weather for growing food. This is comparable to losing the entirety of the state of Iowa's agricultural land to urban development. In fact, urbanization is one of the primary factors contributing to agricultural land loss. But interestingly, the conversion of agricultural land to non-agricultural uses didn't cause much concern at a national level until the 1970s. There was still plenty of land, and steady gains in crop yields made up for any loss of agricultural land. However, a graph from Statista.com shows us that in just the last 19 years, the number of acres allotted to US farms has decreased by about 45 million acres with no signs of slowing. This is no small turnover. Our farmland is irreplaceable and it's disappearing, buried underneath the weight of cities and developments across the US. Genji Wu, professor of resource and rural economics at Oregon State University, writes, land use change is arguably the most pervasive socioeconomic force driving changes and degradation of ecosystems. Deforestation, urban development, agriculture, and other human activities have all substantially altered the Earth's landscape, which can have wide-ranging and long-term consequences. Additionally, land is one of the three major factors of production in classical economics, along with labor and capital. Without the presence of all three, economies and countries cannot thrive. Significant losses of a major commodity in any industry will show, but especially so in agriculture. The USDA states that agriculture and related industries make up 11% of all full and part-time jobs in the US. In 2018, there were just over 2 million farms in operation in the US, down 12,800 from the year before. Farmers make up less than 2% of the population, and they are expected to feed the other 98 on a decreasing number of acres while working against the sprawl that pushes farmers and ranchers out of land and business. The United States is one of 4 countries responsible for a majority of the world's food production, and we dominate the charts in food exports. According to a report released by the AFT, by 2050, the demands on agriculture to produce the necessary food, fiber, and energy are expected to be 50 to 70% higher than they are now. This matches up with the expectation of a world population of over 9 billion by 2050. We have more US agricultural land than we need to meet market demands now, but as populations in the US continue to grow rapidly, there will be a greater need to protect the remaining amount of good agricultural land. Where does the harm to the American farmer fit in all this? A video documentary published in May of last year by Angus TV takes a closer look at the individual impact urbanization is having on farmers and their land. In the documentary, a farmer from Georgia, John Lovin, tells the story of how he and his family were forced to sell their land. As the housing market pushed development further out, the property taxes became such a great financial burden, it was impossible for the family to continue farming on land they'd owned for years. This is happening all across the United States. Every farm we lose is a greater reduction of the finite resource of our agricultural land. It's not just statistics. These are real people and real farms. When we first started examining agricultural land loss as a serious issue in the 1980s, the federal government put several protection programs in place, which are actually seeing some success in a few Western states. Easements, land protection acts, and agricultural zoning are all forms of preservation that are being implemented in an attempt to slow the looming threat posed by urban sprawl. And yet, the issues presented by urbanization or the potential lack thereof formulate a delicate thread which must be kept at even tension by both sides. Too much sprawl, and our farm and forest land lose, quickly throwing environmental and economical balance out the window. But not enough development, and housing prices soar, negatively impacting this country's lower class. Thus, it is our job as agriculturists and future farmers of America to promote awareness and actively strive for the protection of our agricultural lands and the public interest. Studies have shown that American agriculture thrives on the landscape of most urban fringes. Close proximity, high density area can formulate the ideal conditions for food production and farming until the city grows. Just like the couple I introduced at the start, the average American farmer is barely breaking even, and many stories end in much the same way. Allow me to put this back into perspective. In the time that I've stood here speaking to you, nearly 24 acres of the US have been covered with development. And by the time that I've finished with questions, we will have lost 15 more. That may not seem like much, but in 24 hours' time, that number will be up to 4,200. In the next year, 1,533,000 acres of the US will be irreversibly, unmistakably transformed from crops to construction. It's time to press the brakes on agricultural land loss and preserve the precious acres dedicated to feeding our world. It's time to stop this big cut because our land is our future. Thank you.
Second speaker is Sophie Draper from Ontario, and her speech is titled All Hands on Deck.
We have a problem. Over the past several years, farming rates have dropped across the nation, and specifically in Oregon. Every 5 years, the United States Department of Agriculture conducts a census to gain important information. The most recent census was held in 2017, where it was discovered that between 1997 and 2017, total land in farm production in Oregon fell from 17.6 million acres to only 15.9 million acres. That is nearly a 10% decrease. Building and manufacturing is causing Oregon to run out of farmland. Capital Press presented that the loss of farmland has raised major concerns, not only about food production and security, but also fish and wildlife habitat provided by working farms and ranches. The problem is real. It is predicted that in the next 20 years, 2/3 of Oregon's farmland will change hands. Referring to this estimate, Nellie McAdams, Oregon Agricultural Trust Manager, shared, "It is imperative to stem further loss. Once agricultural land is developed, it falls permanently out of production. You can't unbuild a Walmart." Along with these findings, the census also reported that just over 36% of all American producers in 2017 were women. Although this percentage is drastically higher than in the past, it is still too low. Luckily, an excellent solution is available. We need all hands on deck. With the hard work, cooperation, and different perspectives that women offer, a great aid for securing Oregon's farmland is available. We need to enlist more women. I spoke with 3 women who each have different agricultural experiences and backgrounds. I now have each of their testimonies on how enlisting more women can help Oregon secure its land. I first spoke with former National FFA President Brianna Holbert. Brianna shared her thoughts with me and stated, "It is essential to bring women in all areas of agriculture in order to ensure the industry exists. We are alienating a resource and perspective with obvious potential and deserve a seat at the table." Not only is Brianna right about agriculture, but about women as well. In all industries, agriculture included, women deserve a seat at the table and an opportunity to work. Brianna further expounds, "Women are articulate, thoughtful, poised, and strong. And when all these pieces intersect, we have collectively such a strong and sustainable industry moving forward." This statement speaks bold truths. Certainly, women have an essentially different perspective than men and look at problems through a different lens. Enlisting more women would mean implementing new ideas, thoughts, and solutions. Builders and businesses are encroaching upon Oregon's ever-diminishing farmland, and we need the help of women to hold them back. I next spoke with Mrs. Rebecca Ford, who is a global marketing consultant and works for Elanco Animal Health in Indianapolis. She shared the following thoughts. "Women tend to be more in tune to emotions. Female leaders do a good job thinking about the impact of the people, while men tend to think about numbers. Anytime you exclude a group, you're missing out. The more diverse we can be from an industry standpoint, the better. Without a doubt, including women and the diversity we offer is important. Diversity is the secret to success." Mrs. Ford holds a valuable opinion. Diversity is crucial. It is when many different people from many different places come together that great decisions are made and important solutions are found. 36% is not enough for female voices and ideas to be heard. As we are in the year 2020, the male-dominant society no longer can exist. We need the equal voices of both men and women in order to ensure all perspectives are available. We need the equal fight of both men and women in order to secure Oregon's land. We need women to join where they belong, alongside the men. The third woman I spoke with lives not across the country, but instead in my very own hometown of Ontario, Oregon. Her name is Rene Corn. Mrs. Corn and her husband Bruce farm over 1,000 acres of land and are well known throughout the community. Mrs. Corn shared the following thoughts. "My husband and I operate our farm together. It's under both our names. We make decisions together. Some of our greatest successes have come because we've worked cooperatively together." Mrs. Corn makes an excellent point. It is necessary to have men and women working in equal partnership in order to secure Oregon's land. Mrs. Corn went on to tell about female employees she's hired in the past. She shared, We're finding that women are willing to work and are detail-oriented, which has become very important. We have women that work on the farms, driving equipment, and as employees, have great success. Mrs. Corn's observations are not unique. The same thing can be found to be true everywhere. Women are hardworking and persistent, and those are exactly the qualities we need as we attempt to secure Oregon's land. Whether they work behind an office desk or behind a tractor wheel, women are needed, especially now. The call for all hands on deck is not just for the hands of men, but the hands of every gender, race, and religion, and that includes women. The hard work, different perspective, and cooperation that women bring to the table can be the crucial asset in pushing builders and businesses back and securing Oregon's farmland. We have to maintain Oregon's 15.9 million acres, and in order to do that, we need the insights and talents of all. Enlisting more women is not just a thought or idea, it's a solution, and it's the solution we need.
Good morning. Our third speaker is Jonwin Ayers from Rogue River. Her topic and title of her speech is Changing the Climate Perception Surrounding Beef.
Organic, vegetarian, no carb, gluten-free, non-GMO. When aren't Americans discussing what you should or should not eat? But now, more than ever seen before, people are seeking environmentally friendly foods. Food manufacturers are capitalizing on this new environmental attention as a marketing strategy, whether there's truth in the different accusations or not. Now the focus is on the livestock industry, and meat eaters are being shamed for their eating habits. Cattle have now stepped into the crosshairs of climate discussion. Their digestive processes, greenhouse gas emissions, carbon sequestration abilities, and soil benefits all need to be better explained, so all consumers will understand that they can eat beef with not just a clear conscience, but a green one. Pinpointing where this new environmental criticism for the beef industry started is easier said than done. What exactly made Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft, publicly state on CNN how cattle are another large source of greenhouse gas emissions? And what prompted Ellen DeGeneres to start the hashtag of Be Clean, Eat Less Meat? The popularity of foregoing meat in our diets in order to save the planet most probably started with a report released by the Food and Agriculture Organization entitled Livestock's Long Shadow. This report blamed meat production for 18% of greenhouse gas emissions, with as much as 65% of livestock's emissions coming from cattle production. Even this year's Golden Globe Awards went meatless in order to raise awareness about climate change. While ironically, many of the movie stars traveled to this exclusive gala on gas-guzzling private jets. I wonder if Hollywood knows that choosing a jetless lifestyle would save 1.6 tons of carbon from entering the atmosphere per transatlantic flight per passenger, while choosing a meatless lifestyle for an entire excruciating year would only save 1,600 pounds of carbon emission. So before we blame cattle for our inevitable demise, let's take a more realistic look at the effect of cattle production on our environment. Bovine flatulence has truly been blown out of proportion. You've probably all heard about cow farts depleting the ozone layer. Not only is the mainstream media assigning the guilt to the wrong end of the cow, but many don't understand that the digestive process of a cow is a grass-grazing wonder of science. So let's simplify their ruminant stomach. If I ate a bunch of grass, I'd get little to no nutritional value, not to mention the super bad stomach ache. Cattle, on the other hand, have a vastly different digestive system that can convert these low-quality forages. Inside a chamber called a rumen, the fermentation of ingested biomass occurs with the help of these tiny microorganisms. These little gut bugs are what make the ruminant digestive system so much more efficient at pulling calories out of large amounts of forage better than any other digestive system known to man. One of the byproducts of ruminant digestion is methane, which is burped and exhaled mostly. What many don't realize is even though this invisible gas can trap the sun's heat, it also degrades 10 times faster than any other greenhouse gas in our atmosphere. Get this, anything that decomposes emits methane, including uneaten, dead, and dying grasses. Yet when cattle consume and digest these forages, there are vastly more benefits than drawbacks. A huge amount of this Earth's surface is covered in land unfit for crop farming, 70% to be exact. Unutilized land causes decomposing biomass to unlock massive amounts of carbon through the soil. By 2050, the world could see 200 billion tons of carbon being emitted from just the land. Cattle have the power to graze this land and convert it into a nutrient-abundant product. When livestock graze on grasses and other forages, it forces that plant to stay in the growing cycle longer. This process of grazing makes photosynthesis happen faster and more often. Because of that, the higher the photosynthetic rates per acre, the more carbon is being sequestered. Cattle can store 268 pounds of carbon per acre per year. And according to ecologist Alan Savory, the managing of livestock can take enough carbon out of our atmosphere to return us to pre-industrial levels. This is how cattle are professional carbon sequesters. They aren't our enemy in this attempt to manage the planet correctly. They very well could be an answer. Soil management or even soil regeneration is no easy feat. Yet the grazing of livestock has been a proven tool throughout history in resource conservation, soil improvement, and can even promote biodiversity. Not only does their hoof movement, chomping, and even defecation cause new growth of grass above the soil, but it promotes a healthy environment for microbial populations under the surface. This type of grazing is referred to as holistic management. This regenerative practice is becoming widely used throughout the United States in order to maximize the environmental benefits of cattle production. New research concerning cattle, their soil improvement and carbon sequestration abilities have caused some experts to rethink their figures and actually become proponents of the benefits of livestock. Dr. Frank Mittlener, a professor at UC Davis and air quality specialist, has been the leading mythbuster on the Food and Agriculture Organization's initial figure. Since then, the FAO admitted that that 18% figure was grossly over-exaggerated. New research has revealed that all beef production within the United States only accounts for 1.9% of greenhouse gas emissions. Yet this new figure hasn't reached the mainstream yet, due largely to anti-animal agriculture agendas. But I can assure you, as a cattle producer myself, our industry is constantly lowering these emissions percentages. Through new management practices, genetic indicators, and selection methods, we are continually improving. Within the last 40 years, the United States has produced the same amount of beef with 1/3 less cattle. It is time for beef producers, marketers, packers, and consumers to feel proud about beef's synergistic effects on our environment. Any protein alternative today looks to have a much harsher effect on our environment, health, and our pocketbook than the good old one ingredient, nutrient-dense, carbon-storing beef.
Next speaker is Salila Brunn from Hood River Valley, and her topic and speech title is Allowing Agriculture and Fish to Coexist in the Hood River Valley.
Good to go whenever?
You're good.
Okay. The year is 2099. The century is coming to an end. It is cleaning day. As you organize your house, you stumble across pictures from your childhood. The pictures date back to 2019. As you flip through the photos of your youthful self, a photograph of the Hood River Valley appears. The picture brings back memories of seeing the fresh apples, pears, and cherries hanging from the trees. Then you find a picture of your father holding up a big Chinook salmon he caught in the Hood River. Then you remember him talking about this group called the Hood River Watershed Council. Thanks to efforts of this group so many years ago, agriculture and fish still coexist in the Hood River Valley in the year 2099. The Hood River Valley is located in the Columbia River Gorge, 60 miles east of Portland. The valley extends 40 miles from the banks of the Columbia River, where salmon, sturgeon, and steelhead gather, to the north slope of Mount Hood. Their rivers are fed by snowmelt and glaciers that supply the whole valley with water for drinking and irrigation. In most years, there's plenty of water to go around. However, glaciers have been melting rapidly. According to a water planning study commissioned by Hood River County, at current rates of melt, glaciers will supply water for up to 50 more years. The valley is well known for the world-class apples, pears, and cherries. The high-value orchard agriculture is the county's economic backbone. Within the valley, there's over 350 fruit growers. Many of the farms have been owned by the same family for 3 or even 4 generations. According to Columbia Gorge fruit growers, 15,000 acres of land in the valley are used for orchards, resulting in Hood River Valley containing 1/3 of Oregon's orchards. Surprisingly, 12,000 of the 15,000 acres of orchards are used for pear trees, making Hood River Valley the largest producer of pears in America. Water is diverted from the Hood River by several irrigation districts to supply the orchards. 3 districts deliver water to over 95% of the valley's orchards. Because orchard crops require irrigation throughout the growing season, up to 60% of summer flows are diverted for agriculture use. The Hood River also provides a home to Chinook and coho salmon and steelhead trout. Native Americans have harvested abundant fish runs from the river since time immemorial. The salmon are key to their cultural and spiritual identities. More recently, the salmon supports a popular sport fishery, with some Chinook topping 30 pounds. Due to many reasons, the salmon runs have declined to such low numbers that they've been listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Salmon spawn in the fall when stream flows are at their lowest and ag diversions are at their highest. Biologists believe that maintaining and restoring the scarcely summer stream flows is essential for building the salmon populations in the Hood River. In late August, there's a high demand for river water. Orchardists need water to finish their pears for harvest, and salmon need water to reach their spawning beds. Without ample water supply to orchards, fruit trees would not produce high-quality fruit. This would lead to family farms to go out of business and the valley's fruit production to dwindle. On the other hand, without significant stream flows for salmon spawning, salmon would edge closer to extinction, forcing the federal government to step in and take drastic actions, potentially shutting down water diversions. Unlike other areas with similar water bottlenecks, the people of the Hood River Valley choose a path of cooperation. Instead of facing endless lawsuits from environmentalists or paying lawyers to fight over water, local orchardists, along with resource agency personnel and the public at large, with the help of the Soil and Water Conservation District, formed the Hood River Watershed Group in 1993. Monthly meetings are held to discuss topics of mutual interest, such as crop and watershed conditions. Because local stakeholders have been meeting face-to-face for several years, positive personal relationships were formed, enabling a collaborative approach to problem solving. This informal partnership was so successful at addressing challenging resource issues that the governor of Oregon recognized the Hood River Watershed Group and used it as a model to develop other watersheds across the state as a way to foster collaboration amongst agriculture and resource communities to address natural resource challenges. Because of this positive alliance, over $20 million in government grants have been awarded to orchardists and irrigation districts to improve irrigation systems. Orchards pipe open ditches, installed micro sprinklers, and began using soil moisture monitoring systems. Water savings from these efforts helps reduce the amount of water needed for irrigation and results in more water being left in stream for salmon spawning. When stream flows were really low, like in 2015, irrigation managers and fish folk worked informally to share the pain. And this year there was not enough water to go around. The Hood River County declared a drought emergency. It was decided that scarcely summer stream flows could be used to finish orchard crops up until August 20th. Irrigation was then voluntarily curtailed until minimum stream flows for salmon spawning were restored. Because of this voluntary approach, to this day, no call on water has been made in the basin. Thanks to these collaborations, the bonds between fish agencies, tribal members, and orchardists will last for many years. Native American culture continues to flourish, and future generations will be able to experience the lush Hood River Valley and all it has to offer. From the unforgettable views of seeing the orchards in full bloom, to catching that big Chinook salmon in the Hood River. Luckily, the photographs you took in 2019 still could be taken to this day in the year 2099. Without these collaborations, the Hood River Valley would not look the same today. Thank you.
Our fifth speaker is Sadie Olson from Elkton with her speech titled Battle for the Columbia.
Imagine you are a wild winter steelhead. You were hatched in a small tributary of the Willamette River, and it took 2 long years for you to grow from a fry to a par to a smolt. Now it's the spring of your 2nd year, and you make the long trip downriver to the Pacific Ocean. For the next 2 years, your one goal is to stay alive by dodging predators and eating insects, mollusks, crustaceans, and smaller fish. Then one November, you're ready to make the journey back upriver to your natal spawning grounds. Your instincts guide you farther and farther upstream, till in front of you, you see an enormous dam. How are you possibly going to make it over that huge jump? You see some other fish swimming to a spot where the jump is not so steep. That's because humans have put in a fish ladder to divide that monstrous jump into smaller steps. You swim towards it, going faster and faster, and just as you're ready for one wiggle of your tail to propel you upwards towards your goal, snap! You're chomped in half by a hungry California sea lion. In the early 2000s, the winter steelhead run at Willamette Falls was approximately 15,000 fish. By 2017, only 512 steelhead made the journey alive. One reason why? California sea lion predation. California sea lions are a federally protected species that, in recent decades, have made an enormous comeback and are now feeding upon salmonids in the Columbia River more than ever before. In 1975, there were less than 90,000 California sea lions in the entire United States. Since they were placed under the protection of the Marine Mammals Protection Act of 1972, or MMPA, their population has exploded to over 300,000 animals. But while their population goes up, the population of the species they're preying upon goes down, leading towards the extinction of many important West Coast fisheries. This is a trajectory that must be corrected before our well-intended efforts to help the natural environment get way out of hand. Historically, California sea lions never came very far up the Columbia, but since the 1980s, they've been spotted as far upriver as Bonneville Dam and all the way up the Willamette River to Willamette Falls, where in 2017, they consumed 25% of the winter steelhead run. Salmon and steelhead are already threatened, partially because of human activities. one of the ways that we harm them is through the construction of dams. To fix this, we build fish ladders so that the fish can still get upstream to spawn just like they used to. This becomes a problem, however, when all the fish gather in one location before making the jump, making them an easy target for the sea lions who are waiting there, ready to strike. In 2008, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife began trapping sea lions and driving them south to the southern Oregon and California coast, where they're released back into the wild. Sea lions are both fast and intelligent, though, and almost every single one of them returned within 2 to 7 days. To curb sea lion predation in the Columbia Basin further, the National Marine Fisheries Service, which is a branch of the National Oceanic Administration, or NOAA, issued a letter of authorization under Section 120 of the MMPA, according to the Chinook Observer. This would allow for Oregon, Washington, and Idaho Departments of Fish and Wildlife to lethally remove sea lions that fit a long list of qualifications. Because of all the hoops that these agencies had to jump through, however, only a small percentage of the sea lions that were witnessed preying on salmonids were actually killed, leaving dozens of them feasting below fish ladders year after year. To address this issue further, the Endangered Salmon and Fisheries Predation Prevention Act was introduced to the Senate on June 21st, 2018. It would allow NOAA to issue permits to Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and tribes within those states, allowing them to kill a certain number of sea lions each year. These permits would be issued for both California sea lions and the larger Steller sea lions. The number of permits issued, however, would not be allowed to exceed 10% of the total number NOAA estimates could be killed, without reducing the population below the optimum sustainable population. Additionally, permit holders would be required to have training in natural resource management. The bill was amended by the Senate, then passed by the Senate and House of Representatives, before being signed into law by President Trump on December 18, 2018. Immediately, states and tribes began applying for permits. From December of 2018 to May of 2019, 33 sea lions were lethally removed from Willamette Falls, and another 19 from Bonneville Dam. The effects of this legislation are already visible, though, as the winter steelhead run through Willamette Falls for 2019 was 3,202. While still well below the 10-year average, this is a vast improvement from only 512 in 2017. Other salmonid populations saw similar recoveries. While some people saw this as a ray of hope in the fight for salmon survival, there are certain animal welfare advocates who argue we're scapegoating sea lions and blaming them for human activities, what they call the real cause of salmon and steelhead being very near extinction. The sea lions are just eating their natural source of prey, after all. They say we're only treating the symptoms and not the actual causes of salmon and steelhead being threatened. Others say that we should instead improve habitats, fix hatchery systems, and limit fishing, both commercially and recreationally. Constantly changing ocean conditions, habitat availability, and other factors relating to salmonid populations limit our ability to draw concrete conclusions as to the effectiveness of this new law. But at this moment in time, the most efficient and straightforward way that we can continue to protect the species of the Columbia River and its tributaries is through the continued lethal removal of sea lions preying upon salmonids in these specific choke points along the river. There's absolutely no doubt that we are going to have an impact on the species we come into contact with. as responsible inhabitants, we must realize that the species we interact with are part of a complex web. Now that we're tangled in that web, we must understand that while managing certain populations is a must, the proportion of these species to each other should also be taken into consideration, so that we may ensure the balance of biodiversity for centuries to come.
Our sixth speaker this morning is Annika Cook. She's from Dayton FFA, and her speech title and topic is Water Rights, a Dream or a Nightmare.
Ready? Okay. Yep. You finally buy that piece of property in Central Oregon that you have always wanted. The one you've dreamed about for years. With a beautiful stream running through the middle of your ranch and water rights for your pasture. The pasture is green, the grass is tall, and the cows look great. Everything seems perfect. Just then, a water resource professional pulls up in his truck and tells you, you need to stop watering. It's not your day. What? I can't water my pasture? The stream has lots of water. Why can't I water today? I'm sorry, but your water right is from 1941. So it is a junior right compared to many of the other ranchers along the stream. While this scenario may seem unrealistic, it is real and happening to farmers and ranchers all over Oregon every year. So what is a water right and how does it work anyways? Under Oregon law, all water belongs to the public, with some exceptions. Cities, irrigators, businesses, and other water users must obtain a permit or license from the Water Resource Department before using water from any source, whether it be underground or from lakes or streams. Generally speaking, a landowner with water flowing past, through, or under their property does not automatically have a right to use that water without authorization from the department. Oregon's water laws are based on the doctrine of prior appropriation. This means that the first person to obtain water rights on a stream is the last to be shut off in times of low stream flows. In water short times, the water right holder with the oldest state of priority can take what is available to satisfy needs under his or her right, without regard for the needs of the junior users. If there is a surplus beyond what is necessary to fulfill the needs of the right, the water right holder with the next state of priority can take what is available to satisfy needs under his or her right. This continues down the line until there is no surplus or until all rights are satisfied. The date of application for a permit to use water usually becomes the priority date of the right. In the early years of the United States, and mostly east of the Mississippi, the Riparian Doctrine usually applies. Under the Riparian Doctrine, only landowners with water flowing through their property have claims to the water. By contrast, the Prior Appropriation Doctrine is the basis of water law for most states west of the Mississippi. In Oregon, the Prior Appropriation Doctrine was adopted into law on February 24, 1909, and introduced state control over the right to use water. Before then, water users had to depend on themselves or local courts to defend their rights to water. In 1955, all groundwater was also declared public. Ever since, a private right to use public waters must be obtained from the state's Water Resource Department to use water from any ground or surface water source unless a statutory exemption applies. A right to use water once perfected into a certificated water right is a valuable type of property right that attaches to the land or becomes pertinent where it was established and runs with the land upon subsequent transfers of property. Oregon's water laws also include 4 basic provisions. 1, beneficial use without waste. Surface or groundwater may legally be diverted for use if it is used for a beneficial purpose without waste. 2, priority of the right. First in time, first in right concept. The water right priority date determines who gets water in a time of shortage. The more senior the water right, the longer the water may be available in a time of shortage. 3, ownership. Generally, a water right is attached to the land, as is described in the right, as long as the water is used. If the land is sold, the water right will typically go with the land to the new owner. And 4, maintaining the rights by using the water. At least once every 5 years, with some exceptions established in law. After 5 consecutive years of non-use, the right is considered forfeited and is subject to cancellation. Water rights clearly define the specific use of the water. The right will indicate the specific source of where the water can be used and how much use. A water right certificate does not always guarantee water delivery. The prior appropriation doctrine authorizes water use only to the extent that water is available. The amount of water available depends on both the water supply and the needs of the senior water rights. Many farmers and ranchers believe they have vested water rights because their land has used water rights since before the Oregon Water Code was adopted. However, even vested rights can be canceled for lack of due diligence before they are adjudicated by a court and then certificated. If a water permit is unavailable, a water user may be able to obtain a limited license to use and divert water for a short-term or fixed duration. Limited licenses are junior to all other uses and subject to being revoked at any time. Irrigation uses are generally not allowed under a limited license except in cases of severe drought. That dream of owning your own ranch with a beautiful stream running through the middle of luscious green grass pastures and cows and calves running through them and getting fat. This is truly a picture of happy cows. But that dream could quickly turn into a nightmare if you don't understand water laws in Oregon and check with your local water resource department before you sign on the dotted line of ownership. Thank you.
Speaker this morning is Clara Blazer from Tillamook, and her speech is titled, "The American Farmer is an Endangered Species."
Thank you, Lee. Face it, our planet is dying. We hear it all the time. The atmosphere is growing warmer, our ice caps have melted, and ocean levels are on the rise. 4 countries have declared climate emergency. There are 4 other island nations at risk of completely disappearing into the ocean, and just in 2018, 4 animal species went extinct. Scientists say we have between 6 and 12 years to get our carbon emissions down to 0 before it's too late. Politicians tend to take one of 2 stances when presented with this information. Either ignore the facts or try and make a change for the better. But there's a trend among some politicians and activist groups. They like to target agriculture and other blue-collar professions as the reason our atmosphere is warming. They try and convince the rest of the world that methane emission in cattle is causing our downfall and that going vegan is the only answer. In February of 2019, Senators Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ed Markey proposed a new package of legislation called the Green New Deal, which contained a detailed plan on how to implement a nationwide rail system for super-speed trains, as well as funding for hybrid and electric cars and incentives to go from large-scale to small-scale sustainable farming. Since hitting headlines, Cortez has become one of the largest political influencers for climate change and other social issues. She likes to talk about large companies like Pepsi and Apple, but she loves to talk about what a huge impact our eating habits have on the environment and the methane production from animal agriculture. Cortez says herself, "We need to take a look at factory farming, period. It's wild." These factory farms are painted by the media as large-scale animal welfare abominations that pump out sick animals and their manure. But this is quite the contrary. 3 Mile Canyon Farm in Boardman, Oregon is a family-owned business that grows various crops and farms over 70,000 head of dairy cattle. They also happen to be one of the best examples of just how renewable a farm can be. They run power off of a massive methane digester, which is a means of producing clean energy from manure. So they literally run off of poop power. In addition to this, they also have come up with a creative method of getting feed to their animals without stressing their desert environment. They take potato skins from the surrounding food production plants and include it into a specially formulated diet for the cows. Not only is landfill waste avoided, but there isn't any extra land being used to grow feed for the cows. This farm is one of many that are shifting towards greener solutions that both benefit our atmosphere and the economy. Despite being mindful of production and impact, farms like 3 Mile still face extreme scrutiny. Many people have a problem with 70,000 cows in such close proximity. They see propaganda all over the internet about how terrible factory farms are and how animals just get tortured every day. Images are portrayed of barns to make it look like the animals are miserable, when most of us know the barn always looks bad before you clean it. Having 70,000 cows means there's a lot of hurt legs and runny noses. But that doesn't mean the animals are in any more danger because there's more of them. In fact, because there's so many of them, the farm has to hire several on-site veterinarians. They go through the herd every day, resolving previous issues, checking on cows whose milk and activity numbers are showing something might be wrong, and doing all kinds of preventative health care. The question stands, why do we need these massive farms in the first place? Since 1940, America's population has increased by 174%. In 1926, the American farmer fed 26 people, and today they feed 155. Generations have been spent improving productivity in our animals so that we can produce more to meet the demands of our growing population and spend less. While doing so, more eco-friendly animals have been created. For example, modern milk production only requires 21% of the water and 23% of the feed compared to 1944. However, one misconception about the bad conditions these animals live in is all it takes for farmers all over America to fall under attack. And it's not just farmers that get the blame either. Loggers fall victim to misconception as well. HB 2020 was a bill introduced in Oregon in January of 2019. The bill established a new state energy and climate board and proposed a new cap and trade system in hopes of reducing Oregon's already extremely low carbon emissions. After the release of the bill, Oregon went up in flames with people protesting it and people who all of a sudden were anti-logging. Basically, this cap and trade system would make it so that farmers and loggers would have to pay an arm and a leg to continue business as regular, or to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into all new equipment, which for so many just isn't feasible. The bill stipulates outrageous fines and fees on those whose vehicles didn't pass California emission standards. Let's make one thing clear. Oregon's carbon emissions only make up 1/20% of the global carbon footprint. Our output is so minuscule that it makes no sense to write this bill in the first place. Not only that, but Oregon is a world leader in forest practices. The Oregon Forest Practices Act is a collection of laws, some of which have been in place since 1941, made to protect our forests. These laws are some of the strictest in the nation, and Oregon is often a front runner in new technologies. Seneca Sustainable Energy is a logging company in Eugene that uses biomass to provide energy for over 13,000 homes in Oregon. They predict that by 2025, they will have the potential to provide 25% of Oregon's sustainable energy. The facts are there. Our problem is not agriculture, logging, or our love of hamburger, yet senators are still writing bills every day that hurt the little man. In fact, SB 1530 was reintroduced this year, or House Bill 2020 was reintroduced this year as SB 1530. Why does this keep happening? Because many of them don't know. Many of them have never stepped foot onto a farm. There's a lack of awareness in our country. There's a lack of ag education in our country. I doubt either of these bills would have ever even been written had those very senators taken intro to ag or gone on an industry tour through a sawmill. The other part of the problem is that people don't take action when it comes to politics. We have a duty as agriculturalists and leaders to fix these problems. If we don't take action now, there will no longer be the American farmer. Thank you.
Speaker this afternoon or this morning to round out our prepared public speaking is Macy Roselle from Pendleton, and her speech is titled Today's Modern Urban Consumer.
An open letter to today's modern urban consumer. I hope you'll hear me out for a minute. We agriculturists rely on you continuing to put your faith in our products. Without you, we wouldn't be able to continue living and working on the farms and ranches that have been passed down from generation to generation. We love and cherish the opportunity we've been given to feed and provide for the world. And we want nothing more than for that to be done ethically and humanely. And so it saddens us when misinformation is spread about our industry. But we understand how it could seem believable. And I'll be the first to admit that this industry is faltered when it comes to getting the right information out to the masses. But you and I, we have a relationship like no other, because we depend on you and you depend on us as well. So for just a minute, give me a chance to heal and strengthen this relationship once again. Let's talk about some of those common misconceptions, how they affect you as a consumer, and what can continue to be done to strengthen this relationship, this friendship, and this partnership. Let's start the conversation off with the good old livestock production misconception. Should we be getting rid of America's feedlots and industrial farms and moving towards a sustainable, environmentally friendly option? Now, when most people think of industrial farms, they think of a lot of animals in a very confined space, but that's not necessarily true. Let's consider this example. Most large commercial hog operations use an all-in, all-out system, which means the hogs are kept strictly inside and moved through different barns in groups. Each barn has specific temperature and feed based on the age and weight of the pigs, and is disinfected as the pigs move through. It is 100% necessary for large operations to use systems like this to prevent the spread of disease and to remain efficient. In this instance, it's necessary for animals to be raised in what could be considered a factory farm. If these pigs were free range, for example, the chances of them getting sick and suffering increase significantly, which no producer or consumer wants. But I won't deny the fact that not every factory farm uses great practices. But let me emphasize that without these animal operations, it would be almost impossible to produce the amount of meat that's consumed each day. If those against industrial farms became successful at eliminating them, meat prices would skyrocket as American-raised supply lessened, and I can almost guarantee you the United States would have to import meat from countries who don't have the ethical, humane laws America does. But for a minute, let's say we did get rid of factory farms, or even feedlots, which bring up the same issues of harm and confinement and harm to the environment, and move towards those free-range grass-finished operations, or a more sustainable type of agriculture. Now, believe it or not, but those grass-finished operations may not be as environmentally friendly as everyone thinks. There's no question that getting an animal to market weight on grass takes a whole lot longer than on grain. According to harvestreturns.com, a steer is butchered at the age of 15 to 22 months, weighing 1,200 to 1,400 pounds, whereas a grass-finished steer is taken to the rail at the age of 20 to 26 months, only weighing 1,000 to 1,200 pounds. Now, grass-finished beef is a great option for those wanting lean beef. Where the issue appears is when people advertise it as the more sustainable, more environmentally friendly option to you, the consumers. As we already figured out, they're alive for up to 5 months longer, and they require significantly more grazing land, which, depending on where you live, could mean either more acres or more irrigation. Whereas the grain-fed beef, they actually consume byproducts from human food production, such as distillers' grains, sweet corn cannery waste, and bakery waste. Not only do they consume byproducts, but they actually leave a smaller carbon footprint than the grass-finished animals. Now, don't get me wrong, grass-finished beef needs to continue to be produced. I'm simply trying to explain that every type of production has a downside, and no alternative is 100% better. Let me once again emphasize that without each and every one of these types of operations, American food supply would quickly falter or diminish. But now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about a misconception that affects your everyday life more directly: food labeling. Antibiotic-free and GMO-free are two common labels to see in a grocery store, and it's not uncommon to see people pay inflated prices. But should you? Let's start with antibiotic-free. Each and every medication an animal receives has a withdrawal period, which is the amount of time it takes for that medication to leave the animal system. This means that no animal is slaughtered, processed, or milked for human consumption in that time period. Therefore, all milk or meat available to consumers is 100% antibiotic-free, even if they were given antibiotics. The same concept applies to genetically engineered organisms, more commonly known as GMOs. A GMO is any organism that has its DNA altered by genetic engineering. This could be as simple as changing the color on a flower's petals. Some GMO uses in agriculture include creating crops with delayed ripening, increased yields, and pest resistance. But despite the many uses for GMOs, only 10 crops are currently genetically modified. Now, trust me, I understand why the public is weary of GMOs and possible adverse health effects. So let's look at the science. According to a trial done by the National Academics of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, on the basis of detailed examination of currently commercialized genetically engineered and non-genetically engineered foods, compositional analysis, acute and chronic animal toxicity tests, long-term data on the health of livestock fed genetically engineered foods, and human epidemiological data, the committee found no differences that implicate a higher risk to human health from genetically engineered foods and their non-genetically engineered counterparts. When it comes to genetic engineering, scientists aren't trying to harm the public. They're simply trying to find that quicker, more efficient way to produce that ideal crop. Scientists could crossbreed multiple generations of crops to receive the same outcome that genetic engineering produces in one generation as a GMO. Finally, thank you, consumers, for hearing me out. As we go our separate ways, please know we thank you for continuing to put your faith in our products. We want you to have complete trust in your food supply and know that we're trying our hardest to give you quality products while remaining efficient and sustainable. I hope this letter cleared up any common misconceptions or concerns that you come face to face with. And I truly hope as we head into this new decade, our relationship only strengthens. Sincerely, Macy Roselle, Oregon FFA member, 6th generation Century Wheat farmer. Thank you.